Now, back in 2019, I kept on emphasizing that the landscape of the Eastern Conference had changed once Kawhi had joined the Raptors. You saw Jimmy Butler also join the 76ers, and Kyrie was on the Celtics. And also, Giannis started to mature and come to his own while playing for Milwaukee. So the top end of the Eastern Conference, especially in 2019, you can make an argument was much better than the top end of the Western Conference. And ever since then, as the years go by, we've seen certain players come to maturity, and the Eastern Conference, from the middle pack on, is starting to become a lot better. Now, why am I saying this? Is because this season the Knicks are going to have some rivals, new and old. And first, I'm going to start off with our main rival, which is going to be a newer rival for the Knicks, and that's going to be the Atlanta Hawks. I'm not sure if some of you guys seen, but this summer, I'm not really into the WWE wrestling, but Trae Young had actually been part of the WWE event in Madison Square Garden over the summer. He actually embraced this Madison Square Garden evil character that he wants to be. So Trae Young got to understand, especially after last season taking that bow in Madison Square Garden, the Knicks definitely not going to let him escape with that. This season, especially with the rule changes where he can't get those ticky-tack cheap fouls, where he's running into guys, jumping backwards, or leaning into guys anymore, he's going to get confronted, and it's going to be a lot more difficult situation because best believe we're not letting that fucking I'm bowing down, getting flowers like I'm a part of a Broadway play or whatever the hell he was saying. He's going to get pressed about that. And he's going to get pressed enough where his voice might even start switching up.
That was a mistake, a general mistake. I raised my hands up, I've said that, I'm sorry, and I apologise. I really am apologetic.
Yeah, for Trae Young, this season is definitely not going to be the same, especially when we have Mitchell Robinson. If he could stay healthy, he could really be a force in the paint to provide that protection, especially dealing with Clint Capella, who was talking shit as if he was a center, like he was a bona fide center or something, because every time he goes up against a real center, this guy is crickets. But there was a lot of shit talking from both of these guys, and the Knicks kind of alleviated some of the issues that they had last year as far as outside shooting and also having more protection at center. Once again, Mitch Robinson will be back, and we could combine him with Nerlens Noel as long as those two guys stay healthy. But the Hawks are further along in their rebuilding phase than the Knicks are. They were the team that actually spent the most money in the 2020 offseason, and they also added this year Dion Wright to kind of alleviate Trae Young on the defensive end. And also, they're going to get a couple of key guys back with health, aka Cam Reddish. That's unbelievable. They just had him on the bench last year, but he was not healthy. And hopefully this year that team does not deal with as many COVID issues as they dealt with in the past. But they are a deep team. We've seen last year, even guys off the bench like Kevin Herter actually lead the Hawks past the 76ers, ironically. And they also have Lou Williams off the bench, guys like Deandre Hunter. I mean, Deandre Hunter, believe it or not, defensively especially, he's much better than Cam Reddish as far as playing for this team. Like, he's in a much better position to be a more useful guy right now for the Hawks than Cam Reddish. But Danilo Gallinari, his shooting surprisingly was spotty, and the Hawks, I would not be surprised if they try to end up moving him. But they gave John Collins also an extension, which is pretty good. Like I said, this team is very deep. They also have a draft pick from 2020 and a Kongu that they also have to develop. But this team, once again, is very deep. Trae Young does not have to do as much scoring as he did before, but he will be playing the Knicks under different circumstances this year. We can spread the floor out with our shooting. Also, Mitchell Robinson could provide much better paint protection than we had before, especially with all the weight that he gained. He's not going to be getting tossed around like before. And most importantly, with Trae Young, he can't take advantage of the old rules like before. Jumping into guys, leaning sideways, jumping into threes, like all this bullshit that he used to do. He used to dribble past guys, then he would take a step back into the person and try to draw a foul. All those moves will be illegal. This will be a great fun matchup for the Knicks, and I do have the Hawks rated as our #1 rival for this season. And even the NBA knows it because they got us under a Christmas game against the Hawks. So it is what it is. Our next top rival, which I have, is a rival that's been long awaited for these two teams to be relevant again, and that's the Chicago Bulls. And man, oh man, Chicago's versus Knicks this season is going to be Nice and sweet. Best believe that. And I see Chicago, man. Chi-Town is hype. They're looking at DeRozan. They're looking at Levine. They're looking at what they used to average, and they're going crazy. They're like, oh, we could beat the Knicks for sure because of, the numbers. Them numbers. But wait, hold on, Chi-Town. Not so fast. I better hold on to your Yeezy hoodies and jackets and army fatigues or whatever y'all got over there. Because there's a couple of things we got to look at here. First of all, Chicago, man, who's playing defense for y'all? That's one thing I'm always asking. And some of y'all three-point shooting, I understand, man. Lonzo Ball doing his thing. His three-point shot does look a lot better. Why are you guys going to be relying on that for the whole season? And I know you guys are loving your guards, especially with the combo offensively with Vucevic down low. I mean, you guys should put up a number of points, but defensively, we all know Vooch is your weak point. So that's been causing an issue for you guys all last year. Especially with Zach LaVine, you guys got to ask yourself, it took this guy so many years to at least win 4 games in a row. I still think he didn't win 4 games in a row yet, or maybe last year he did for the first time. But he was in the league for more than 6 years and never won 4 games in a row. So that's something, Chicago really has been struggling with, even to close out games. This team is not that good closing out games, and they turn the ball over a lot. So I'm not sure if DeRozan could even help you out with that as much, maybe in the mid-range, but still defensively, what is he really going to do for you guys? And also with Chicago coming off their bench, who's shooting threes for this team? You guys are going to rely on that streaky young player that you got. What's his name? Kobe White. So Chicago, man, should be very entertaining to watch, but they may end up the same way like they were last year, in which they just kept giving up points non-stop. And shooters to space out the floor may be an issue for this team, especially from three-point range. They got Caruso, Lonzo Ball, DeMar DeRozan, and Zach LaVine. Again, this will be an entertaining squad. And, a lot of points will be scored, and a lot of points will be scored on this team. Best believe that. But the way Chi-Town, man, is just dismissing the Knicks like we're not even close to being on their level, or we're not even on their level. That shit is laughable, man. Because this team has a lot of holes in it. Offensively, defensively, you guys turn the ball over a lot. I mean, it is what it is, but you guys definitely made a splash in free agency by just signing some names. But at the end of the day, at least the Knicks and the Bulls are relevant at the same time. And it's good to see that these teams will square off in a winter night and it'll actually mean something again. I guess we're almost on the path of East Coast basketball fully making its return. And I can't be mad at that. Next up is an old-time rival. We're going to have to claw and fight and do all the sneaky shit to try to pull off a win against this team. And that's the Miami Heat. And what does good old Pat Riley got cooking down in Miami? Boy, Pat Riley be working his players harder than North Korean soldiers, man. I mean, goddamn, Pat, you got the technology down there, but you got boots on the ground. Fuck all that, right? He had Jimmy Beans, man, look like he was about to Drago himself in the finals. I saw somebody at the sideline screaming, "Get him a Gatorade!" Nah, but in all seriousness, the Miami Heat are going to be a very tough team to beat. For starters, they actually had a whole off season to recover. So unlike last year when they just played in the finals in the end of October and then they quickly had to readjust and get ready for the start of the season by the end of December, they didn't really have that much recovery time. And you've seen how that team last year had to deal with a bunch of injuries. So they're going to be well rested and they're going to be pretty much ready for this season. And plus, the addition of Kyle Lowry is actually a missing piece that they needed, which takes a lot of pressure off of Jimmy and Bam. So that was a good addition for them. And also, I got to give it up to Pat Riley. Miami is actually very good at developing players in-house. You look at Tyler Hansborough and you look at Duncan Robinson. They just keep finding guys and keep developing guys that actually fit well in their system. And sneaky ass Pat Riley was able to steal PJ Tucker from the Milwaukee Bucks, which is probably the biggest mistake of the NBA offseason, is the Bucks letting him slide. That didn't make any sense. But the Miami Heat are going to be a much improved and much well-rested team coming into next season. So our Knicks got to be very disciplined against a team like that. And they got to stay very well conditioned. Sort of like them North Korean soldiers when they be slamming their head through the bricks, man. We got to be like that going up against that team. because they're going to be trying to win by any means necessary. As we've seen in one of our matchups against them last year, how Jimmy Butler kind of faked an injury and then he was like looking at the camera and smiling. See, because they understood that the refs didn't have much respect for the Knicks because the Knicks are considered a young team. That was before the Derrick Rose trade, when we had that loss against Miami when RJ kind of missed that layup. So they kind of understood that. So that team is willing to pull all types of tricks to win, man. We got to be careful with a team like that. Good old Pat and Jimmy boy, man. There's something else. And finally, one of the main last rivals I'm going to get to before my notable mentions is going to be the Brooklyn Nets. And boy, oh boy, this is a complicated situation with these Nets. I tell you that. First of all, I'm going to say this. Kevin Durant is by far the best player in the league, in my opinion. But in New York City, Julius Randle gets more love than Kevin Durant. There is no doubt about it.
I just realized you the fucking king of New York.
Now, before I get to the roster constructions, I'm going to say this about the New... I was about to say the New Jersey Nets. I should call them that. I'm going to say this about the Brooklyn Nets. They're sitting in a king's position from a roster standpoint, but also at the same time, they're sitting in a position of scarcity. It's very weird. And only Kyrie and KD can find themselves in this situation. But this team is. First of all, KD's invested into this team as he signed an extension with the Nets, but James Harden could opt out at any moment. And at the same time, with this Kyrie situation, it draws a lot of eyes on James Harden as the pressure on him kind of mounts up. See, James Harden was kind of sitting quiet, just being kind of the ride-along guy. But now all of a sudden with Kyrie out of the picture, it's like, yo, you better help Kevin Durant get to this promised land. And meanwhile, at the same time, Giannis does not even have the pressure of winning a ring since he already won one. So Giannis could actually operate more free this season, almost at a position where he has nothing to lose while going up against the Nets. See, James Harden has never even reacted well to pressure. So now he has to deal with Giannis, which is already a player that does not even agree with James Harden. They kind of have beef. But Giannis is at the unique position where he could go up against these guys with not a care in the world, which is dangerous for them. It's almost like when KD and James Harden go up against Giannis and Chris Middleton, Giannis and Middleton will be almost playing like a team that has nothing to lose, but yet they're the champions. This is a very weird dynamic that the Nets are in. And at the same time, the Nets are heavily invested into this team because they'll be repeat yearly offenders of going over the luxury tax, which is already another penalty on top of it. So not only did they double down by signing James Harden onto this team and going deeper into the luxury tax, meanwhile, while not being able to sell any tickets for the 2020 season, now they're going to be a repeat tax offender, which is already another penalty by the league. The percentages go up every year you go over the tax. If you go over the tax 3 out of 4 years. So the Nets are definitely in line for that. So they're going to be paying those penalties. And at the same time, they're already in year 3 of this whole Kevin Durant, Kyrie kind of movement to Brooklyn. And yet they see nothing pay out. There's no dividend payments. There's no championship appearances. There's nothing. So this shit has to start paying back and working because they're spending too much money on this, especially going through a pandemic. And now James Harden, he thought he was going to be along for the ride along. But now he's going to be, the New York media is going to be looking at his ass like crazy, saying, hey, James, what are you doing? Where were you on this last second play? You can't hide around like last year, blaming it on a hamstring injury. Is this yet another playoff disappearance, James? See, once the media starts kind of formulating these things around James Harden, we got to see how he's going to react to that pressure. And based off the way he reacted in Houston when it came to playoff pressure or just last minute crunch time pressure, the shit wasn't good. And James Harden has not formally yet been introduced to the New York media. Let's make no mistake about it. He's been hiding behind Durant and Kyrie. And now with Kyrie gone, there's going to be more spotlight focused on him. Now this brings me back to the Knicks versus the Nets this season. And it's more than just looking at the rosters. Oh yeah, the Nets got Harden, they got Durant. You have to understand this Kyrie situation throws a monkey wrench into this whole thing because the Nets are a very top heavy team. I mean, their team right now looks like the fucking old man Avengers, where they got to get LaMarcus Aldridge and Paul Millsap. I didn't even know Paul Millsap was still in the league. So at center, this team is very weak, and that's going to be their very weak point. So Mitch Robinson should be feasting on this team. They have nobody to really guard the paint but those two kind of bulky old power forwards. And if this Kyrie situation continues to play on like how it is now all season long, James Harden will begin to feel that media pressure, critiquing his every performance. And that's going to start weighing in on this guy because he has a track history of this. And best believe there's a reason why he didn't sign his extension yet. So he can still opt out. And the New York media will begin picking at him. Hey, are you going to extend with the Nets? Are you going to extend with the Nets? What about your performances in crunch time? Why are you not doing this? Why are you not doing that? That's why I said this season is more than just looking at the roster with the Nets, especially going up against the Knicks. You got to look at a lot of other factors, especially internally with this team, which is supposed to be a very top-heavy team, and their ownership has paid out a lot of money, especially through the pandemic, not selling any tickets, and they're not seeing any return on investment. Giannis already got his ring, so when Giannis goes up against Brooklyn, there's no real pressure on him to beat this team because no matter how he's judged, he's already a champion. So he has nothing to lose going up against the Nets, which is very dangerous, number one. And the Knicks, in a way, will be playing the Nets in a similar situation as the Bucks. Of course, we're not the defending champions, but we're free to do us. The Nets are going to get critiqued in a way because for the amount of money they spent and for the things that, especially the New York media, assumed that the Nets would be the talk of the town, they got to start seeing results. And once again, with the Brooklyn Nets, I believe their weak point, especially if things don't go right, will be James Harden, and it will be attacking the middle of that paint with LaMarcus Aldridge and Paul Millsap. Like, this team is looking like the Avengers. Patty Mills. You see, these signings weren't bad until Kyrie, that situation with him came about. That's going to cause a major issue, and especially due to the fact that they can't replace Kyrie this season. So once again, the Nets are operating from a king's position roster-wise, but at the same time, they're kind of operating from a place of scarcity, especially when they're trying to buy guarantees like an NBA Finals championship, which owners like Steve Ballmer and the Clippers, they understood that that's not possible, especially in a city like New York, where the energy is one of one, the fan base is one of one. Everyone's seen that energy, how it looks like, how it feels when they saw game one between the Hawks and Knicks last season in the playoffs. It can't be duplicated. It can't be purchased or sold. It's truly one of one. Now, here are a few teams I would say that are not necessarily marquee matchups going up against us. That's because of the timetables that we're in. We're either ahead or behind these teams as far as rebuilding mode to making a truly a contending team. But first, I'm going to start off with the Toronto Raptors. This team in the future is going to be very interesting. But right now, they're dealing with Pascal Siakam. If he's an overrated, overpaid player that they have right now, he's not really living up to his contract the past 2 seasons. But Toronto this year are actually playing home games in their home city. That makes a big difference because players actually get a stable place to live. They don't have to travel as much. Toronto, I think, traveled more than any other NBA team last season because even the games that were in conference, they had to take a flight to. So their season last year was very unpredictable, but I think this team is a sleeper team, low key. I mean, they got Fred VanVleet, who still, is doing his thing. OG Anunoby is actually coming along great for this team. He actually has some crossover moves. His passing skills are up. His shot making ability is up. And then low key, man, Toronto, they got another steal in the draft, man. They were able to get, I think, the 4th or 5th pick. They got Scotty Barnes, which he's going to be a real official player. Once he gets his NBA body, this guy is going to be a serious problem. But the Toronto Raptors, they're a young team, man. They're still very interesting. Another notable mention is the Philadelphia 76ers. Even though this team should be on their championship trajectory right now because this team is basically built to do it. And they're going to have to take advantage of Embiid, especially his next 3 to 4 years, because he might not be healthy after that. But they're just still holding on to this whole trust the process system by holding on to Ben Simmons. They need to let that shit go already. That is pretty much done. They're fortunate still right now to have a decent team, even after letting Jimmy Butler go, which is obvious now that they should have kept him. But this is still a very good team, because remember last year Embiid was out and they still finished first. So Philly just has to build up Ben Simmons' trade value and perhaps get a shooter for him. Because right now, even with Ben Simmons on the team, I think they have a young player, Maurice Tybalt. You know, they still don't have that perimeter shooting, and that's really what's hurting this team. Because keep in mind, last year they got killed by the Hawks by Kevin Hertier. I mean, he came off the bench and just pretty much smoked that team and closed that series, which is very odd. But when the Knicks do go up against Philly, it'll be great if we could just outshoot this team, especially with Kemba Walker. If he continues shooting his threes at an efficient rate. Same thing with D Rose, Quickly, Evan Fournier, Toppin. I mean, we pretty much could shoot this team out the gym because they don't have any perimeter shooters like that. But defensively, this team is a problem, especially inside the paint. Mitchell Robinson don't get into foul trouble with Embiid, but Embiid is a superstar in the league. This guy can pretty much dominate. But once again, the 76ers are built to go to a championship. They're way ahead of us as far as the rebuilding stage, but due to the fact that Ben Simmons, even though currently he's playing with the team, but he's still not getting along because he clearly got kicked out of his first practice. So it is what it is. We'll see how this plays out. But so far, it's still not looking good with Ben Simmons, and especially with a coach like Doc Rivers. In his last 10 years, his resume is not really that good. And he has lack of an imagination, especially making mid-game adjustments. And the last team I have in my honorable mentions is the Boston Celtics. They basically added Dennis Schroeder due to the fact that he couldn't get the contract he was looking for. And they added back Al Horford. They changed their coach into their GM. They got rid of Danny Ainge because of lack of an imagination. I mean, it's real strange that Las Vegas has his team winning 46 games and the Knicks only winning 42 games. You know, something doesn't add up. This team wasn't even better than us last year. There's too much emphasis on Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown lifting this team up to the next level, which they haven't really done. Remember, in the bubble, they barely got past Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet. And Pascal Siakam was playing like shit that whole series. So we have yet to see these guys elevate and go on to the next level. When they didn't have pressure on them that year that Kyrie was injured and they went to the Eastern Conference Finals against LeBron, they had no pressure on themselves. So, of course, they performed well. But once that pressure came on, these guys that very next season did not even perform anywhere near the same. But individually, of course, like many young players in the NBA, they put up great individual stats. They're sort of like in their early days of just collecting, you know, individual accolades. But as far as lifting a team up to the next level, they haven't really got there yet. And the Celtics low-key are in rebuilding mode. So last season, the Knicks were way better than this team. I don't know how Las Vegas has this team still up on 46 wins, but I think that may be a trap. And of course, once again, I always say this, a lot of media members, especially the NBA media members, are based in Boston. So of course they give this team a very good rep. But as you guys seen earlier in my segments, we had a New England based beat writer question what's going on in Boston really, because that question has never really been asked these past couple years, because that's a team in flux and in rebuilding mode. I expect the Knicks to pretty much dust this team during the regular season, even with Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Of course, these guys are highly talented players, but I don't believe with the roster that's been constructed around them, especially just adding Al Horford, is going to really make a difference.